I now call SNP spokesperson Chris Stephens.
Thank you, Mr Vickers. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair, and can I say at the outset I will be referring to my, I should refer to my register of members' interests, as there will be a number of topics where that will apply. I'd like to thank first of all the Honourable Gentleman for Harrow East for opening the debate and doing his best Sir David Amess impersonation. A great man, and someone who was always, for me, one of the highlights of these adjournment debates. Is, you know, he often managed to go through 47 issues in his allotted time, and that was 47 press releases during the recess in the South End newspapers. I even found myself in the South End newspapers in one of my exchanges with Sir David's probably one of the pinnacles of my parliamentary career so far, Mr Vickers. Can I thank everyone who's contributed? There's a couple of things that leaped out for me. The Honourable Member for Hackney South and Shoreditch reminds us that there are still injustices that affect the LGBT community, and I want to thank her for raising those issues. The Honourable Member for Congleton, who continues to raise issues in relation to persecution and religion. I really enjoyed the Honourable Member for Redden East's contribution and the history of Oscar Wilde in jail and all of that. That was an excellent speech. And can I say to the Honourable Member for Bosworth, he was talking about body image, and I can tell him that when I attend regularly secondary school citizenship events, these are events where school pupils want to present to elected members issues of concern that they would like elected members to raise. Body image comes up every single occasion. There's always a group of young girls who have, as that project, something that they want something done about, is issues to do with body image. And I think that that's very encouraging that young women are doing that. Mr Vickers, of course, there are a number of other issues, and I think that the thread of much of the debates we've had over the last few weeks is, frankly, that the cost of living crisis is still biting. The cost of living crisis is still affecting far too many in society, and the economy is struggling. And the Resolution Foundation report that's recently been published, that shows that after 15 years of stagnation and austerity, workers are £11,000 a year worse off than our European neighbours. That's a staggering statistic, Mr Vickers, and one that I think that all of us should contemplate when we are in recess. And I should say at this moment in time, for those watching, it is a recess, not a holiday. And there is a big difference between the two. Ipsos Mori polling of 6,000 adults in February suggests that 2/3 think that the UK economy is going to get worse in the year ahead. And the polling also found that 1 in 4 are struggling on their current income, and nearly half are worried about their financial situation. Now, I believe that, and I've always taken the view as an elected representative, that I have a duty and responsibility to try and tackle some of that, and that's why I do work with Feeding Britain and Good Food Scotland, and we've now opened 3 larders in Glasgow South West, and we will be opening a mobile larder in Glasgow South West. We have one in the Linthouse area, we have one in the Cardonald area, we have the Three Hills larder, which will become in June the Scotland's first community supermarket. And this is about giving people the opportunity to buy food at cost and to help them see their money stretch a bit more, and also have the wraparound services in relation to that, so that people can get help. Like, for example, the staggering statistics of so many of our constituents across these islands who are not claiming pension credit. And that's something that I think that we all have a responsibility to do, and I want to encourage the government to keep pushing this issue of making sure that those who are entitled to that support are getting that support. But it also leads me to, and I'm glad that the chair of the Public Accounts Committee is here listening to me as I raise some of the other issues and hobby horses that have been raising for a long period of time. And that is universal credit deductions is a nonsense. This nonsensical position, Mr Vickers, where people are either told you wait for 5 weeks for your first universal credit payment, or you can get a loan after 2 weeks, and it is a loan. Government ministers keep telling me it's in advance. Well, so when you ask them, so that means that you give someone money and you expect them to pay it back. That is a loan. That's the dictionary definition of a loan. But how we get into this situation where far too many people who are struggling are paying back deductions over a long period of time, I think really needs to be addressed. And I would encourage them to go through the DWP Select Committee report, which recommended that the starter payment should be within 2 weeks, because I'd be very interested, and I anticipate an intervention of the Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, for example, and investigate what the administrative costs around this whole administrative exercise of the whole deduction system, and I'll gladly give way.
Mr. Vickers, Honourable Member has tempted me into an area of concern, but I think what he highlights actually is something that we very often raise on the committee, is that you can have a Whitehall decision about what a policy looks like, but once it hits real people's lives, it can be very different. And I think that he and I would probably both agree that we need to see much more of that understanding of real people's lives while policy is being made, and it shouldn't be. And Whitehall can seem very distant from our constituencies, and this is an exact case in point.
Well, I thank you very much for that and those kind words. I think it's a duty of every parliamentarian to speak truth to power and to highlight real life experiences, because that's the only way that we can make policy better, is if we actually provide those real life experiences. And that brings me then to the issue of sanctions for those who are going through the social security system, Mr Vickers. We've seen a huge increase in the number of sanctions. How do we know that? Well, we know that from parliamentary questions that I tabled in November, which gave statistics from November 2022, which showed that sanctions were ramping up incredibly. Of course.
It's a very important issue. The Public Accounts Committee has looked at sanctions. They don't do what they think, what often ministers and government think they do. They're actually ineffective. There are other ways of encouraging people into work. Sanctions are a blunt instrument which don't work.
Well, I agree with that, and I think that incentives, they should look at incentives rather than this blunt instrument approach of hammering people with sanctions. But what surprises Mr Vickers, it won't surprise those of us in the opposition benches, is that I recently tabled a parliamentary question to get the update in the figure from sanctions, to see if the numbers from November had increased again. And I received a response, Mr Vickers, which many opposition members will be familiar with, which said that they were no longer going to provide those figures because to publish those figures would be at disproportionate cost. Yes, our old friend, disproportionate cost. That tells me that there is a huge increase in sanctions again, so much so that publishing them means that they can only be published at disproportionate cost. What an absolute, complete and utter nonsense and outrage. And I again anticipate an intervention from the Chair of the Public Accounts Committee.
Mr Vickers, I would just point the Honourable Gentleman to the National Audit Office, which has access to a lot of data that often government doesn't wish to necessarily put in the public domain, but it has a complete access rights. But I'm shocked that that the government won't release information on sanctions. It's actually a vital piece of information, of management information, that they should have.
Well, absolutely. I hope that the government will look at those issues. My last issue, Mr Vickers, that I want to raise, because I'm conscious of time, is, and I say this as Chair of the PCS Parliamentary Group, is that I hope that the government will start to negotiate with its own workers and its own workers' trade union, particularly the PCS. They are alienating their own workforce. The same workers who were applauded as heroes during the pandemic are now finding themselves with their employer seeming to dig their heels in during the worst cost of living crisis in recent memory. And there's now going to be strike action in coming weeks in the Passport Office, Animal Health and Plant Agency, Ofgem, British Museum, British Library, Government Digital Services, and a further UK-wide action taking place at the end of April. I hope that ministers must see that that is not a sustainable position, where there are so many workers who feel they've been so mistreated over pay and pensions and other issues that so many, indeed 130,000 civil servants, are having to take industrial action. And I hope that the government will put real and new money on the table to resolve those issues. As the Honourable Member for Harrow East had reminded us, Mr Vickers, it's not just Easter, there is other celebrations from other religions going on, Passover and Eid, and I hope that all honourable members across the House have a good recess and do the great work that we all try and do for our constituents going forward. Thank you.